Yahweh, Barak Yahushai, Barak Yahweh, Barak Yahushai, Barak Yahweh, Barak Yahweh, Ba'Hashem Yahushai, Ba'Hashem Chakudash. The blessings to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone True Well. Salutations to hopefully elect out there, you Akim to Sadakim, that do this thing in the utmost truth and sincerity. On the Pre-Shaman, this week's topic is going to be entitled Understanding Deficits, right? Deficit spending, actually. Let's do deficit spending. Yesterday was understanding tariffs, and that lesson aged extremely well. I mean, shortly after the show, because in the show I mentioned that Mexico and Canada will capitulate. Shortly after the show, both did. First Mexico, then Canada, making a deal because whoever cares less has the leverage. In the United States is the most powerful nation on earth, you know, highest GDP, strongest military, strongest currency, all this sorts of stuff. And you know, another thing too is, and China as well. I think China, then the EU will start to make deals with Trump, because again, the United States holds a lot of leverage. It has for many years. It's just that this dude Trump is, you know, one of the guys is going to take advantage of it. And you know, in a separate chat, you know, just talking with different investors and shit in the world, one of them posted trade wars, and I said the same thing. I said China and Mexico will capitulate and Trump will look more like a boss. And sure enough, that's what happened. And somebody actually said that, oh, Trump was a boss, he got these people to do that, this. Not understanding that was very predictable to happen, right? Because let's look at it. Less than 15% of the United States GDP comes from imports. Everything else is domestic, man. So the United States is self-sufficient. It doesn't need oil, it doesn't need lumber from Canada. They don't need shit. And sure enough, those other Canadian companies, guess what? They're moving their manufacturing plants into the United States because this is the same play. You know, this play is not a new play. The media is giving it more light, but it's not a new play, okay? It's either you move your stuff and manufacture in the United States or you get hit with tariffs, okay? Which is tax on your imports. Now I want to talk with about deficits and the debt and these sorts of things, and let's get some understanding on trade deficits, right? Let me see if I have Salakia. Let me go to the first scripture. So the first scripture is this, the book of Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 6. It says, shall not all these take up a parable against him, a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe unto him that increaseth that which is not his, right? Because the so-called white man, Esau Edom, has stolen everything he's got. He's raped, robbed, and murdered. He's used manipulation. So, right, he used predator banking, loan, all this sorts of stuff to got what he got, ill-gotten gains. It says, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Okay, and that's what we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about that, thick clay, because that's what the word there for clay is ibatya, right? And the reason I want to do this lesson is because you're going to be hearing things like that when you listen to the news, and I want to shed some light on that. So, deficit spending. What is deficit spending? Okay, deficit spending is when when you're borrowing more than government revenues, for example, right? Which it's not always good and it's not always bad, and that's what I want to shed the light on, because sometimes the media, and this is the thing too, if a media is left-leaning, they're going to put their own opinion in a particular thing that Trump says. If it's right-leaning, it's going to do the same thing. You kind of want to look for some stuff like Forbes is doing good right now. Forbes, they're just showing these interviews, no bias, no journalist, no reporter, just show the interview. That way you can put together your own facts, okay? Because if you listen to certain things, they'd be like, deficit spending is bad. Deficit spending, okay? Let's get the understanding of it, is not always bad. I'll give you an example, right? Let's give an example, right? Lower taxes. Is lowering taxes good for you or bad for you, right? It's good, right? You want lower taxes, right? Well, guess what? If I lower taxes, that's deficit spending, because I just slashed government revenues, because that's how the government makes its money, through taxes. So it's not always just cut and try, good and bad. In fact, when we go to this whole situation with the United States debt, the United States GDP to debt ratio is about 112%, but guess what? Japan's is 229%. There's other countries, Singapore, over 200%. China's supposed to be this big bad person that has a lot of debt from the United States. Guess what? They're at 79%, and the United States also has their debt. So it's a bunch of debt everybody got. And there's good debt, bad debt, you know, because if it's just about not having debt, then you see a lot. You when you go to this GDP to debt ratio per country, you see at the bottom is a lot of third world countries, a lot of countries with shit economies, or not that very powerful economy. Why? Because debt is used to grow. Okay, and I'll give you an example of deficit spending doesn't necessarily mean I'm broke or in debt, right? Let's say I make 200,000, right, and I borrow 20,000. There's two ways I could have got that 20,000. I could have worked for that 20,000 and saved, or I could have borrowed it, invested in it, right? Now, I just did 20K deficit spending, but if I have that 20K in an investment vehicle, am I truly in debt? Not really, you know what I'm saying? So, countries, corporations, they use it to grow. It's in the scriptures tell you it's a defense. Debt is a lower cost of capital. It can be a lower cost of capital because let's go back to growing that 20K, right? You can spend a lot of money and do a lot of stuff to actually to save and acquire that 20K, wherein I could have just borrowed, you know, and I could always write off the tax on the interest paid. So deficit spending isn't always a bad thing, especially if you have a low interest rate environment. In that situation, you want to borrow and you want to go invest. And I'm going to talk a bit about inflation as well. Again, 7, it says, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them. Okay, let me go to the next scripture. All right, let's talk about money real quick. In the book of Genesis 13:2, it says that, and Abraham was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. Right, so tangible assets, these intrinsic values of assets, is, you know, that's the Most High's money, gold. But we're not operating in that. We're operating in the fiat-based system. We're operating in a system where it's about borrowing. All right, it's about borrowing to grow capital. It's about interest. It's about all these sorts of things. So you can't really apply you know, just having gold and cattle as how America is going to be run. You know what I'm saying? This is how come you have booms and bust cycles, because with credit you could create money out of thin air. You know, you could create more businesses and shit by borrowing. That's how come when the corporate tax went down, when interest went down, guess what? All these assets and stuff went up. You know, that's how come you might see sometimes you might hear Trump say things like he wants a weaker dollar, right? Because when you have a dollar, like you saw what happened with Mexico's dollar, Canadian dollars, and China's dollar in relation to the dollar, it plummeted big time because, you know, there were the whole fear of the trade war situation, which right now Trump is just using tariffs and these sorts of things as a leveraging tool to make a deal. Let me get the next scripture. Hey. Now, usury is not something you're supposed to do towards another brother, right? And I'm going to read that scripture. Well, usury, I mean interest, right? You're not supposed to be putting interest on your brother. It says, if thou shalt lend money to any of my people, Israelites and Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, that is poor, by thee thou shalt not be to him an usurer, right? So if you don't got no money, you're not supposed to put interest on it. It says, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. So you're not supposed to lay upon usury upon the poor of your people. But guess what? When it comes to these other nations, you're damn right you could use usury, all right? You're damn right you could use interest. Interest is awesome when it's working in your favor. When it's working against you, it's a bitch. Fucking credit cards and shit like that, shit could put you in a deep hole. But when you have interest working in your favor in the form of assets, okay, you love that shit. This is the scriptures of Deuteronomy chapter 23 verse 20. It says, unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not be upon but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, right? So when you take money and you invest it, all right, guess what? You're hoping to get interest upon that return. And there's certain things that will help in your favor, such as, I'm going to just quickly say it, weaker dollar, lower interest rates, and inflation. Yes, inflation, okay? Why would you want inflation? Why does the government want inflation? Because just think about it like this. Think about something that's deflationary versus something that's inflationary. Let's use examples. When was the last time you ran out to go buy a TV? Probably can't even think of it, right? Because when you buy a TV, you don't plan to go buy another one because TVs are inflationary. The moment you buy one, it's only going to depreciate in value over time. Nobody's in a rush to go get that. Now look at things that are inflationary, like groceries, for example, things at the food store. People are in a hesitant rush to go buy those if it boosts the economy, because in their mind is things are going to go up, so let me go buy, spend, and that's what drives up assets. And we saw that in the last 2 years under Biden, right? Inflation went up under Biden, but guess what? The stock market back to back in the past 2 years was up over 20%. Why? Because those are businesses. If inflation goes up, the price of the price of things goes up, guess what? These businesses, your Costco's, your Walmarts, their earnings go up. So this is how come sometimes you want to see, you'll see them talk about let's raise inflation. It's not necessarily to say let's inflation to collapse the dollar. It's because these people want to make more fucking money. You know what I'm saying? It says, lend upon that the Lord, Salakia, that the Lord thy power may bless thee in all that in all that thou settest thy hands to in the land whither thou goest to possess it. So the so-called Jew, all right, has adopted our laws, statutes, and commandments, and they've found out ways, you know, how to really better their people, because they're going by some of the things of the scriptures, all right. You know, they're being like they do everything for each other. That the way the so-called Jew moves is how we were supposed to move with that wisdom of the law, statutes, and commandments. Having our own community, holding down the Israelite, you know what I'm saying, building Israelite businesses, all right, putting usury upon the nation but not upon your own people. These sorts of things, you know, will grow a society of you know, of a tribe, if you will. You know, so some of those practices they're doing, the righteous ones, at least the ones according to the laws, all right, they got that from the scriptures. And they run the world, and that's how they've done it. They've done it through things like predator banking, man. All right, what's predator banking? They could use 10%, all right, to get 100%. I'm sorry, $10,000 to get $100,000. They take that $100,000 and lend it out. They get they use 10,000. They get 100,000 at like 1%, right, or something ridiculously low, and then take that 100,000 and lend it out at 20-something%. And the moment you're getting more in return than the cost to borrow, you're gonna be up no matter what. If you're getting, it doesn't matter if you're getting 5% return on a 4% something you borrowed, you're still growing. The moment the inverse happens, no matter how high the return, let's say you're getting 30% return on your money, but it costs you 35% your cost of capital, you're gonna be losing. All right, but that's how they're winning. So that when you hear them say trade deficit, when you hear them say deficit spending, okay, it isn't always cut and dry negative. If you look at any company's balance sheet, okay, what has their assets and liabilities, damn near all of them, you're going to see that they have debt on their balance sheet, because it's a defense. There's many tools you could use debt for if you know how to use it. The thing is, most of you niggas in the world, the 2/3, they just borrow money and do dumb shit. They borrow a credit card, run the shit up, max it out, and then complain. You're like, but you know, but Esau's doing borrowing, but he's having a completely different outcome. Why? Because they teach their children and all this shit, these sorts of things, how to use it, how to, you know, these sorts of things, all these different financial understandings, man. All right. But man, there's a lot going on, man. The moment I said I'm gonna do a lesson on this, next thing you know, the USAA thing came out. I kind of briefly discussed that too in the last lesson, that Elon Musk with Doge, all right, they're scanning every item line, and they finding a lot of shit that the government was doing, like funding research in Yuan concerning the C-19. A lot of shit's coming out. These devils are gonna devour each other, and I through the spirit, I believe you're gonna see a lot of pawn sacrifice. You're gonna see a lot of political figures, okay, that Biden didn't get a chance to preemptively pardon, all right, get federal investigation launched against them. So exciting times for sure. And the spirit jumped on me to do some other economic thing out there, because I did do this trade deficit lesson a few years ago, but it got deleted on GMS Born Again. So the spirit had me revisit it since it's being talked about now. Hope brothers were edified. You know, like I said, you could always look into the things I mentioned so you could get a better understanding on your own as well. And I'm going to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shah, Ba'ashim Rachak Kodash. That belongs to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone True Well. Salutations to the hopeful elect out there. You Akim to Zadakim that do this thing in the utmost truth and sincerity. Shalom.